Good evening. Welcome in daily UPSC editorial audio program. History lesson: The Times of India. Government of India in the government of history lesson: The Times of India. Sukhu's strange law. Push to ramp up manufacturing. The Economic Times. Be the space for advocating peace. Biotech enigma. The Hindu. Should lateral entry in the civil service be encouraged? Now the full editorial. History lesson: The Times of India. Government of India Industrial Cities Plan will face challenges that other mega projects failed to overcome. The cabinet decision to approve 12 new industrial cities with an investment of rupees 28,602 crore is impressive in intent. Spread across 10 states, the projects aim to boost domestic manufacturing by building greenfield cities, embodying plug and play and walk to work concepts. A million direct jobs and 3 million indirect jobs would be created through the initiative, which is to fructify by 2027. Government has claimed. A follow-up to a budgetary announcement. The 12 cities would add to 8 such cities that are already under different stages of implementation. That some success has been achieved in investment term at 4 industrial cities that are in place in cause for optimism here. For instance, Tata's announced a mega investment of rupees 91,000 crore for a semiconductor fab unit at Dholera earlier this year. Reports say Hyundai has agreed to set up an automobile hub at Jahirabad in Telangana, one of the cities green lighted on Wednesday. Track record uninspiring, but the larger government agenda of boosting manufacturing has left a, a lot to be desired. Make in India, launched in 2014 with fanfare, was meant to increase manufacturing share of GDP to 25% by 2025 and create 100 million additional jobs. Those targets will not be met by next year. The earlier SEJ policy had also failed to achieve its objectives. How vigorously projects are pursued post announcements is a key factor here. There is also the larger issue of planning for the sector. For instance, we are yet to come up with a new industrial policy. Industrial cities work best when planned alongside larger urban development of chosen sites. This is the experience of China with siege at places like Shenzhen and Hainan. Several industrial cities government wants to develop aren't large enough. One at Prayagraj is a mere 352 acres. Success of the initiative would also hing on cooperation with it hing on coordination with states, some of which are ruled by opposition parties. What about investment? Besides, there is an all important issue of front linkages for infra that is created. While government has enumerated sectors in which it seeks investment, will companies be forthcoming? Investment by Indian companies is yet to pick up, and FDI has been on a declining trend for past 2 years. Creating infra is sound policy, but a change in investment climate is a must if policy is to translate into results. Sukhu's stand law, rising women's marriage age to 21 is a redundant and regressive move. Himachal must do a U-turn. It is a puzzle how Congress Sukhu government in Himachal passed a bill raising the age of marriage of women to 21 from 18. The measure is unsound legally, politically, socially. It does anything but but serve the purpose, Suku's health minister declared as the bill's intention. Empowerment of women by delaying marriage. The reality is early marriage is an outcome of lack of education and economic opportunities for teen girls, legally, politically untenable. Government of India's bill on the same with similar intention introduced in the previous Lok Sabha earlier this year thankfully lapsed. Congress roundly opposed it, which makes it odd that Suku would pass almost the same law within months. Surely he is aware uh, Himachal's law can be rendered void. Central law provisions which have age 18 as the age for women to marry overrule state status. If the Himachal bill becomes law, it will create unnecessary liabilities and court cases, a burden people enforcers and courts can do without. Socially unsound. Himachal is not among states with a high proportion of child marriages. So why such law? Further, on what basis did policymakers conclude marrying at 21 is empowering when none of the factors that lead to child marriages are improving? Yes, child marriage must be tackled. Girls with no education are up to 6 times more likely to marry before they turn 18. Child marriage is a symptom, outcome, endgame of several disabilities. Address those causes: poverty, poor access to school, nutrition, and safety infra. Patriarchy that denies young girls sexual choices. In her safety lies family honor. However, warped the notion, the perception remains reality. Child marriage is seen as a solution. Don't want girls marrying before 21. Provide them options. But the cost of infra required to ensure colleges, employment, economic and physical security is borne by government. Cost of a bad law is borne by the people. This law is de dereliction of state's duty. The sooner it is bent, the better. The Economic Times push to ramp up manufacturing. Industrial smart cities need state support. Government of India's plan to set up a string of smart cities along industrial corridors is the next step in a broader push for manufacturing exports and lowering logistics cost in the economy. Connectivity along these corridors has been upgraded over the previous decade, and investors can expect the new industrial cities to offer technology and sustainability solutions. Government of India sees the initiative drawing in investments that can create 4mm direct and indirect jobs and seed clusters of investments by small enterprises. The idea is to have industry specific hubs that can sustain themselves as global manufacturing bases. This messes into PLIs available to select industries and the recently announced incentives to encourage hiring new job seekers. The idea of industrialization through dedicated urban packets, urban pockets has had a long history in India. Public and private sector have made the anchor investments. Mining, petrochemical, and manufacturing hubs have mushroomed all over the country with active support from the central and state governments. The focus has shifted to drawing in investors who are evaluating India as a base for global manufacturing. Government of India is also trying to improve the attractiveness of the hinterland over port access, which influences investment decisions in manufacturing export. Any success with drawing investments to the northern states will build on the infrastructure upgrades the country had witnessed over the past decade. Yet, just a PLI scheme has yielded a range of outcomes. Industry-specific smart industrial cities can be expected to be a mixed bunch. There is also the matter of bringing states on board to deliver on the potential of these townships. State governments have a conspicuously large role to play in the ease of doing business. Apart from contributing financially to the development of these clusters. The proposed 12 industrial smart cities are spread over 10 states, some of which have noticeably lagged in industrialization. Be the space for advocating peace. Narendra Modi's visit to Ukraine via Austria and Poland last week, followed by calls with Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin, has been 360-degree diplomacy in action. It also opens the door wider to speculation about India's role as an honest broker beyond what otherwise cliched term signifies. This was not another installment of India's great balancing act. What Modi provided was a clue stressing that India has always chosen a side, that of resolution, practicing a level of neutrality, committing to peace critical for its own well-being and development, and that of the larger world is uh, its PO POA. India's need and limitations make crafting a balancing role challenging. Both Russia and the US are important partners for New Delhi, a relationship that has become more complex in the elephant forever in all rooms these days, China. So far, India has explained its choices. It can do well to reiterate the facts. No country's foreign policy comes at the cost of national interest. Nobody expects India's engagement with the world to come at its detriment. That India shapes its engagement with the world in light of its national circumstances and interest cannot be a cross it has to bear, even if it may seem to some abs- absolutist as fence sitting. Like the two principles, India and much of the India and much of the developing world need an end to the Russia-Ukraine war, a resolution that respects territorial integrity and sovereignty and the rule-based order. That is what India, most developing countries, Ukraine and Russia need. Practicing neutrality in a geopolitical context, India must be the space where peace can be advocated. With the geopolitical elbow room it can uh, elbow room it has created for itself, India and Modi can be the facilitator of disentanglements. Biotech in Injigma, The Hindu. Biotechnology initiatives need long-term capital investments. Earlier this week, the cabinet cleared a proposal, though without specifying a budget, called Bio E3 or Biotechnology for Economy, Environment and Employment. Its thrust is to boost manufacturing in the biotechnology sector. Since 1986, India has had a dedicated department for biotechnology and which deserves substantial credit. For instance, the progress in vaccine development, diagnostics, and biologicals that has bolstered India's reputation as a vaccine factory is due to the initiatives of this department. However, biotechnology did not quite spawn the equivalent of the IT revolution. There is much more to an industrialized biotechnology sector beyond vaccines. There are billion-dollar conglomerates today that rest on high-value microbes, gene modification technologies, bioplastics, biomaterials, and high practicing medical devices. However, despite the know-how and human resource capital, only a few Indian biotechs have global resonance, as there are few local manufacturers who can supply Indian laboratories startups with the ingredients and devices to make products. The reliance on imports means that India loses its international competitiveness. The Bio 3 policy aims to correct this. In the last 4 decades, India has founded biotech research institutions but now sees that it needs to be going beyond and setting up companies in public-private partnership mode to bolster technology manufacturing. There are six verticals that this initiative envisages: bio-based chemicals and enzymes, functional food and smart proteins, precision biotherapeutics, climate resilient agriculture, carbon capture and futuristic marine and space research. Futuristic have been saying that the era of fossil fuel industrialization is over and humanity will have to rely on the natural world for food and for making consumer products. This is to solve the global problem of non-biodegradable waste and carbon emissions. Future industries must be grounded in environmentally benign product, and this is impossible without sophisticated biotechnology. By setting up biofoundries and bio artificial intelligence hubs, the policy hopes there will be avenues for a variety of biotechnologists to congregate. Well intentioned this may be, but India's woes with manufacturing have chronic causes because establishing enabling ground for long-term capital investment, and these have little to do with biotechnology per se. Top-down initiatives will have limited impact. The Bio E3 policy must be a deeply collaborative effort between center and states rather than expect quick returns. The government must provide financial and infrastructural support over the long term. Should lateral entry in the civil services be increased? Ashok Bardhan Shetty, retired IAS officer from Tamil Nadu cadre and former Vice Chancellor of the Indian Maritime University. Harsh Srivastava, a former CEO of the Microfinance Institutions Network, was deputy speechwriter to Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and a consultant in the Planning Commission. Last week, just days after issuing an advertisement for 45 lateral entry posts, 10 joint secretary positions and 35 directors and deputy secretary positions, the Union Public Service Commission (UPSC) withdrew its after receiving a massive backlash. The opposition parties accused the government of attempting to bypass reservation policies and snatching away jobs from other backward classes, OBCs, scheduled caste, and scheduled tribes (STs). Should lateral entry in civil services be encouraged? Ashok Bardhan Shetty and Harsh Srivastava discussed the question in a conversation moderated by Priscilla Jebraj. Edited excerpts. What is the need for hiring people from outside the IS Indian Administrative Service? Ashok Bardhan Shetty, we definitely need expertise. Nobody objects to hiring experts as advisors or as consultants. What is objectionable is hiring people as deputy secretaries, directors, and joint secretaries where there are administrative posts. They are secretarial posts, and because these are administrative posts, they are secretarial posts, and expert is not suited for these kind of posts. The combined civil service exam is one of the toughest. Last year, out of 13 lakh applicant, only 1016 were selected, of which about 180 were selected for the IAS. People go through this tough exam and then put in 9 years of service to become a deputy secretary in the central secretariat. They put in 12 years to become a director, and at least 16 years to become a joint secretary. Lateral entrants, on the other hand, will walk in on the basis of a resume and a half an hour interview. Harsh Srivastava, an advertised post for about disaster management, semiconductor, fintech, investment, emerging tech. They are very specialized posts. Regular officers may not have this expertise. I would like to differentiate between implementation and policy making. These officers who are being hired as lateral entrants are for policy making. That is their expertise is needed for implementation, which is typically in the state and not in the union government. You would need IAS officer who are generalists. Ashok Bardhan Sethi, it is not that policy making is separate from implementation. They are intimately connected. You cannot make good policy unless you also have the experience of implementation. When policy making is divorced from implementation, you end up making airy fairy policies which will flop. You must also look at what happened in Pakistan in 1972. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto set up an administrative reform commission which said the same things, that the civil services of Pakistan is full of journalists and what we need is specialization. So Bhutto said lateral entry is necessary, and he started appointing party people, loyalist in post from deputy secretary to secretary. After he fell from power, General Zia Haq dismissed Bhutto's appointees, but he started inducting military people through lateral entry into Pakistan civil service. Today, the Pakistan civil service is a mess. Lateral entry, by whatever name it is called, is just a euphemism of the spoils of the lateral entry, by whatever name it is called, is just an euphemism for the spoils system. That is, political parties trying to favor their party persons under the guise of bringing in specialists. I don't mind if these people appear for a tough written test on their domain of expertise and then go through a rigorous interview. But selecting them purely on the basis of their resume and conducting an interview is very dangerous. Even if it is done properly in the initial few years, in the long run it is bound to degenerate into a spoiled system. Political loyalist, cronyism, nepotism and corruption will creep in. What would you suggest to prevent such a crony system from taking root? Harsh Srivastava, this argument can be extended to anything. What is to stop the UPSC when it conducts interview of IS aspirants from looking at their ideological learnings and leaving out people who are not ideologically aligned? Also, nowadays we know everything about everybody. We have LinkedIn profiles, social media feeds. If the UPSC took somebody who had nothing to do with semiconductors as the joint secretary for semiconductors, I am sure questions will be asked, PILs will be filed, and the Supreme Court will hold the UPSC chairman in contempt. Ashok Bardhan Sethi, an interview alone is insufficient to test expertise. The recent case of Pooja Kherkar is an example of why the interview can be misleading. She scored more marks in the interview than the most IAS toppers. The UPSC interview board could not spot that she is faking her identity, so an interview alone is not a reliable guide of expertise of a person's attitude and personality. At what rank do you think it would be more suitable to bring in people from outside? Ashok Bardhan Sethi, either you select people at the entry level through a tough competitive exam, or you should bring in lateral entrants at the secretary level, at the highest level. If you bring in somebody like a Manmohan Singh or a V. Krishnamurthy or a MS Swaminathan, there is no problem because their expertise is beyond doubt. But at the mid level, the expertise of the person is open to question. I am not ruling out the possibility of someone like a Bill Gates or a Mark Zuckerberg doing wonderful things in their 20s and 30s, but those are not the kind of people who are going to apply for the post of director, deputy secretary and joint secretary in government. Harsh Srivastava, I would say that the joint secretary level, because they have experience and can be of help in policy making. The point of being an offer and not a consultant is that you have the authority of getting something done, and you can direct people beneath you and you are responsible to the people above you. Somebody who has worked in a top company, assuming they want to take a salary cut and join the government, would bring a certain style of working, of conducting meetings, of not just going through endless rounds of papers and not taking a decision. They will get things done and make out of box suggestions. What we should learn from some companies about how they take on board outsiders as seniors. The reason the policy was actually rolled back was the opposition's accusation that the government was bypassing reservations for lateral entries, lateral entry hires. Is the opposition right? Harsh Srivastava, no, first the government did not say we are hiring 500 officers every year and now we will hire only 455 officers under the existing reservation and will take 45 directly. These are additional officers. Second, the government could have said that at least in one third of these seats, preference will be given to women or STs. But these are additions. They are not going to take away existing job. They are not going to take away existing jobs. Ashok Bardhan Sethi, I beg to differ. These are not additional posts. These posts are carved out of existing post of joint secretary, director, and deputy secretary. They are affecting the promotion prospects of existing career bureaucrats. In fact, during the UPA, United Progressive Alliance to government, there was a recommendation that 10% of the total post be earmarked for later entry. Of course, it was never acted upon. Regarding reservations, there are already standard norms saying there is a 15% reservation for SCs, 7.5% for STs, 27% for OBCs, and 10% for EWS, economically weaker sections, among other classes. The Department of Personnel and Training's own infrastructure are that reservations must apply for any post, even if it is a contextual post. If it is for more than 45 days duration. These posts are 3 years to 5 years, so reservations should have applied to them. But there is another provision which says if it is a standalone post or what they call a single post cadre, reservations need not apply. This applies to situations where there is one post of vice chancellor or one MD of a public sector undertaking. The UPSC has treated each of these joint secretary, director, and deputy secretary posts as subject specific, and through this narrow definition, it has converted non-standalone post into standalone post and then called them as single post cadres and not applied reservation. The government at the highest level has realized that there is a problem here, so the minister for personnel Jiten Singh wrote to the UPSC saying the government would like to re-examine this matter, which I think was the right thing to do. Otherwise, theoretically, each post job description is unique, so you can always argue that every post is a standalone post and reservations won't apply. Thank you.